right, this is exciting, isn't it?
Here we go, guys, in 5, 4, 3.
Here we go.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Thank you for good programming, and I appreciate the content and really enjoyed every moment.
It's a privilege to have you on your station, and it's good stuff. It's very educational.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hi, thanks for being here this Wednesday, January 8th. I don't know if you have seen any of the video coming out of California. So far, there are what are described as a great number of significant injuries. So far, only 2 deaths in what is proving to be the worst wildfire in California history. There is actually 3 different fires going on right now. Thousands of acres being burned up. Our good friend Bruce Rines, former LA CBS News deputy bureau chief, I got in touch with him. He is not, they live in LA, but he's not in the line of fire. He's literally, no pun intended. He is to the south. My daughter was supposed to fly back to LA today, and her roommate said, you know what? We were all being told to work from home. We're being told we should wear masks if we leave the house. And we're also being told, you might want to pack a bag just in case we give a sudden order for you to evacuate. So she's staying another day. She's hoping one more day and there will be more progress against these fires, because Bruce Rines was telling me this morning that within the last few hours, the winds have died down. Aside from the fact that once this hit the urban Pacific Palisades area, it swept through God only knows how many homes, because, you know, like a typical urban area, it's home after home after home after home. And one catches fire, the other catches fire. It's a domino effect. And the winds have been anywhere from 80 to 100 miles an hour. They are just, at their worst, they were described as hurricane force winds. Firefighters in Los Angeles calling on other departments as far away as Oregon and Washington to send trucks and firefighters, because they just don't have the people. They just don't have enough people. President Biden has said that he is going to call out the National Guard. Like I said, let's hope Bruce is right, and that if indeed the winds stay quiet, that will give firefighters a chance to get a leg up here and get this stopped. But even some of Thomasina's friends who don't live in the fire area, live south of that, were sending her some pictures. The sky's black with smoke. They've been told mask wearing. Here's an example. Just around the Los Angeles area, there's something called an air quality index. Generally, it goes from 1 to 500, 1 being the best. Before dawn this morning around Los Angeles, the AQI measured at 569, which isn't even on the chart. Absolute dangerous smoke. And part of the reason why this smoke is especially dangerous is because the houses are burning. So this isn't just wood smoke, which in and of itself would be difficult enough for anybody with asthma or any kind of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. This is burning plastic, burning chemicals. It is in sufficient concentration a pretty toxic brew. Another one of my friends who no longer lives in that area, but did live in that area for many years, raised a family. in that area. They were talking to one of their adult sons who's been watching the video footage of the fire. And their son described these fires as watching his childhood burn to the ground. Their house, they think that the house they lived in is gone. The elementary school their kids went to, they think is gone. All the kids' playing fields are gone. He said, as well as things like, our local cafe, gone. Gone, gone, gone. It's terrifying. There was a story that I read in the Washington Post last night about a guy who lived in this area where the fires are, but worked in downtown L.A. when he realized that the fires were spreading through or encroaching on his neighborhood. He got in his car to try to drive home because he had 2 dogs. And he had to abandon his car. He rented a bike and tried to bike the rest of the way, but couldn't get to his house. He was sobbing to the firefighters, trying to tell them that his 2 dogs were in the house and repeating his address over and over again and begging them to try to rescue them. Firefighter apparently said, "We will do what we can. We will try." President Biden is in the Los Angeles area, not because of the fires. Most lawmakers, elected officials, unless they are actively involved in managing resources, they try to stay away so as not to get in anybody's way. But President Biden is in L.A. for the birth of his great-granddaughter is due to deliver a baby today, and he was in town for that. Vice President Kamala Harris and her husband Doug Emhoff, who of course are from that area, they're not there now, but there have been reports that their neighbors have been told to evacuate. It is, there's actually 3 fires burning right now, at least 3 fires. Some of the footage on CNN this morning from Altadena, which is kind of near Pasadena. I mean, even the CNN reporter who I was watching yesterday, and she was walking around. Today, she's still there, and she has goggles and what appears to be like a K95 mask to do her reporting because the air quality is so bad. And, she's, as many journalists are, right there by the fires. That's how we're seeing this footage. And so much footage of homeowners with garden hoses trying to wet down their houses, trying to keep the flames at bay. It is massive. But, like I said, Bruce Rhines said that in the last couple of hours, the winds have died down, and maybe that means that firefighters will be able to stop the progress of these fires. They're not really sure how it started. There was apparently around New Year's Eve, there was a small fire on top of one of the hills, but nobody can be sure if that's what led to this conflagration. And, man, it is just hellish. And it's just heartbreaking. And I have a feeling that when all is said and done, they are going to find that the death toll does not remain at 2. These fires just came so fast. Okay. President Carter His coffin was flown to Washington yesterday. There was a motorcade that brought his coffin to the Naval Memorial. From there was a funeral procession to the Rotunda, where his body is now, where it will lie in state. Tomorrow is a national day of mourning. When Jimmy Carter's body was brought into the Rotunda, it was populated by a veritable who's who of everybody of any importance in Washington. And John Thune, who is now the Senate Majority Leader, Mike Johnson, the Congressional Majority Leader, Kamala Harris, all got up to speak. Amy Carter was there at the very beginning, shortly after her dad's body had been brought in. The cameras were on her. And, you would think that people who've lived so much of their lives in view of the public would be, and often are, very stoic under circumstances like this. But early in the proceedings, the cameras caught Amy Carter taking what I can only describe as a shuddering breath. You could tell that she was working very hard to stay in control. Like I said, Vice President Harris got up and made remarks. President Biden will be speaking at the actual eulogy. He will be giving a eulogy. His remarks should be coming to us tomorrow. But I thought what Vice President Harris had to say, I was kind of hoping that the timing would work and I could carry it live, but that didn't work out. So I was looking her speech over on C-SPAN last night to see if I could find what was maybe most interesting to share with you from it. She started her remarks after, thanking everybody and acknowledging President Carter's family. She started by talking about Jimmy Carter the man, not Jimmy Carter the president, just Jimmy Carter the man. And we think we know who he is. We have these ideas of Jimmy Carter. But if you really look into who he was, how he grew up, I'm willing to bet you don't know as much about him as you think you do. I thought it was utterly fascinating. Lady B, let's start with Vice President Harris talking about Jimmy Carter, the man. Listen to this.
Today we gather to celebrate the life of a man whose works will echo for generations to come. A man from Plains, Georgia, who grew up without electricity or running water and served as the 39th President of the United States of America and lived every day of his long life in service to the people. President James Earl Carter, Jr. So I was in middle school when Jimmy Carter was elected president. And I vividly recall how my mother admired him, how much she admired his strength of character, his honesty, his integrity, his work ethic and determination. his intelligence, and his generosity of spirit.
Grew up in a house with no running water and no electricity. How many of us can imagine that? Kamala Harris also went on to talk about Jimmy Carter's many accomplishments. And again, this is a guy you think you know, but you don't. There was so much more to this guy. And admittedly, most of us, I mean, Kamala Harris said she was in middle school. I was in mid-70s. I would have been in college. And so I should have been, I should know more than most. But whenever I read about him, whenever I hear someone talking about him, I'm always surprised. There was so much to this man, so much more than I think we remember or give him credit for. She talked about Jimmy Carter's accomplishments. Listen to this.
Jimmy Carter was a forward-looking president with a vision for the future. Consider his establishment of the Department of Energy in 1977, which anticipated the central role it would play in addressing the climate crisis. His creation of FEMA in 1979, which enabled our nation to mobilize a national response to disasters, which has helped countless communities rebuild and recover. And his founding of the Department of Education later that year, which elevated public education institutions and increased national standards for the education of America's children and future leaders. Jimmy Carter was that all too rare example of a gifted man who also walks with humility, modesty, and grace. Recall the stories from the 1976 campaign about how he slept in the homes of his supporters to share a meal with them at their table and to listen to what was on their minds. How on their first trip for Habitat for Humanity, Jimmy and Rosalind rode the bus with the other volunteers. And when the group stopped for the night to stay at a local church, Jimmy and Rosalind gave their private room to a young couple who had put off their honeymoon to join the trip. And with the other volunteers, they then slept on the floor of the church basement. And then, of course, his work to eradicate the vicious guinea worm disease that once disabled millions of people a year. It was one of the Carter Center's greatest triumphs. And Jimmy Carter, of course, given his nature, attributed its success not to his own leadership, but to the thousands of everyday Africans who were on the ground doing the work. Throughout his life and career, Jimmy Carter retained a fundamental decency and humility. James Earl Carter, Jr. loved our country. He lived his faith, he served the people, and he left the world better than he found it. And in the end, Jimmy Carter's work and those works speak for him, louder than any tribute we can offer. May his life be a lesson for the ages and a beacon for the future. May God bless President Jimmy Carter.
This Thursday, of course, is the National Day of Mourning for President Carter. The public visitation ends Thursday morning at 7 a.m. Jimmy Carter's funeral will take place Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11:15 a.m. And I think that is Eastern time. Since I'm reading this schedule in the Washington Post, I'm guessing that is Eastern time, so be prepared if you want to watch it to have your television on at 9 a.m. The Washington National Cathedral is going to live stream the service. It has its own YouTube channel, believe it or not. After the funeral, the 39th president will fly Special Air Mission 39. Jimmy Carter's body and his family will be flown out of Washington back to Georgia. There is going to be a private funeral in Georgia later that afternoon at the Maranatha Baptist Church. That's where Jimmy Carter taught Sunday school. That's scheduled for late afternoon. There will be a private family interment, and that will be late afternoon, early evening. People are calling Jimmy Carter the kind of president we don't see anymore. Do you think that's because of his moral nature and trying to bring those morals and ethics to public life? Certainly seems like we're pretty far from that right now. And did you catch in Kamala Harris's talk, Jimmy Carter was the one who founded the Department of Education. Do you think the Department of Education is going to survive the next 4 years? Donald Trump has talked about doing away with it. Of course, he talked about that in his first term as well. Instead, he decided to place Betsy DeVos in charge of it. Never did get it dismantled. That doesn't mean this time he won't. I didn't realize Jimmy Carter was the one who created FEMA. I mean, most of my adult life, I've just always assumed that a federal emergency management was part of our government as long as we've had government. I mean, it seems so logical with all the wildfires, hurricanes, floods, disasters of one sort or another. It's been a part of my entire life. There's a disaster, FEMA steps in to help with the cleanup, help with the shelter, help with low-interest loans. I didn't realize that was from Jimmy Carter. He was an incredible man, an incredible president. Joe Biden is speaking at the funeral tomorrow. I will bring as much of his remarks as I can to you tomorrow. By the way, we have the text line open and the phone lines open, 773-763-9278. I'm going to talk to you, take your calls, read your texts up until today is Wednesday. We're going to do it up until 3:15 today. We've got 15 extra minutes. So give me a call, 773-763-9278. We'll be back after this.
There's no excuse to miss Joan Esposito.
It's number one on my stereo.
Live, local, and progressive. You can listen to her daily at WCPT820.com on your computer or phone.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
We are talking about the news of the day. We are reading your texts. We are taking your calls, 773-763-9278. Somebody texted in and they were concerned that these fires out in California wanting to know, was there any evidence that they might have been deliberately set? It does not appear so. None of the experts that I've been reading have found any evidence of that, though, of course, there'll be a big investigation afterwards. Mostly, it has been very, very, very dry out in California. There was some speculation by one official that maybe New Year's Eve fireworks might have sparked at least a small fire on a hillside. But the guy who mentioned that said there is simply no way of knowing what the cause was. And I know it seems suspicious because there are, at this moment, 3 different fires. But there's no evidence yet that anything was deliberately set or that any one person or group of people is going to be held responsible for this. Let's go to the phone lines. Jim is on the line from Chicago. Hello, Jim. How are you?
Hi, Joan. You were just mentioning in Kamala Harris's eulogizing Jimmy, his giving nature about giving those newlyweds his private room that he and his wife slept on the floor. So it showed his romantic side to his nature. He had many sides to his nature, but they're all giving sides. But the reason I call that, I hate to bug your audience. It's such a great show, and I love to hear everybody call. I hate to monopolize. But yesterday, it really got me. AP had one announcement, Trump talking about democratic injustice to him. The judges have been corrupt. The political system has been corrupt. So in his mind, or whatever the Republican Party, what they're trying to emphasize is their party is above reproach, and that anything that goes against them is a democratic conspiracy by judges. This is how far we've gone in the country, and it's incredible. But what about Steve Bannon? Wasn't he supposed to go to court for stealing a couple $100,000 from the wall? I guess he got away with it. I
do recall that after he got out of prison for his first conviction, he was going to be going back into court. And I can't remember if he was in prison because of the fake fraud scheme where it had to collecting money to finish the wall, or if that was the second thing he was charged with was the fake scheme. I can't keep Steve Bannon's crimes straight in my mind. But you're right. He was supposed to be back in court facing other charges.
I'm sure that I know the House, the Speaker of the House said the first order of business is to rebuild that wall. They'll probably put Bannon in charge of the cash register again. But then you got to think of Cannon down there blocking this report by the prosecutor in this document case. But all of this points to a judicial system that is completely out of control. I've never seen it.
Yes.
Could you imagine going to court, Joan, and you've got to declare you're a Democrat or a Republican? If you're a Republican, you've got to find out, is the lawyers got to find out the judges voted Republican or Democrat over his lifetime before you present your evidence? I mean, this has gone completely bonkers. Bonkers.
I don't know. Sometimes I wonder, people like John Roberts and even Merrick Garland, they're surrounded by people who think they walk on water and just, kowtow to them. I wonder if they have any idea that the vast majority of the people in this country think that both are failures. Does Merrick Garland understand how people hold him responsible for so much of what's gone wrong? Does John Roberts realize that most people believe that he is as lawless and as partisan a hack as the court that he leads? I wonder if they, self-delusion is a very, very, very powerful thing. And I wonder if either of them really grasp the depth of the disgust so many people feel for them.
And Sean, think of this. I know, but think of this. You've got a person taking over 4 years of our United States of America, and he disparages the Democrats at every turn. Instead of being happy about his election victory and saying that, like anybody who had a right-minded person, say, I think I'm president for everybody here. You know, Georgia, California, Alabama, Hawaii, you name it. But not this guy. He disparages Democrats at every turn. They were the ones that persecuted him, and I mean, it's the most.
Well, he needs an enemy. He's, know, his whole shtick is let's be outrageous, let's be angry. So that's the thing. That's what you remember I talked about how after the election I was surprised at the number of trolls who bothered to text me, and even after Trump won, how angry they were. And it is a movement that has at its heart anger. This idea that somehow no matter how successful you've been, especially if you're a white guy, you've been screwed over. You didn't get all the opportunity you should have gotten. You didn't get the promotions you should have gotten. You didn't have the success and the riches you should have gotten. And no matter how successful you are, you're angry that you didn't have more. And that's Donald Trump. That's the fuel. That's his fuel.
Yeah, I know, but how in the heck? Well, you've got 4 years of trying to research all this, but 4 years of this, how long can you disparage one party as if they're the culprit in some kind of a Shakespearean play? That without the Democrats, if we were just a one-party MAGA rule, we'd all be in clover. I mean, how ridiculous is that, Joan? Anyway, enough of me. You guys great callers, Joan, and take care. Thank you, Joan.
Thank you, Jim. As far as that goes, I was playing some sound from Chris Murphy earlier in the week where he's like, you know what? Like, Democrats have to start doing things. His suggestion was that Democrats needed to start organizing and opposing Donald Trump's cabinet picks. But, he makes a good point. And I think that Donald Trump will have less success tarnishing Democrats when Democrats find their spine and find their fight and come out swinging. Let's go back to the phone lines. Maria from Chicago is on the line. Hey, Maria, thanks for calling in today. You want to talk about Jimmy Carter?
Oh, yes. You know what? When I became eligible to vote, he was the first president I voted for. I was so excited about him. Aww. I saw what kind of a man he was, and I felt so good voting for him. And subsequently, there's been other presidents, people that were candidates that I voted for, and I could say that I picked really well. And Carter, when I voted for him, I know, I picked him good, but then unfortunately other people don't. But with all the stuff that went on behind the scenes to steal this election from Carter, because this has been going on for decades now, where the GOPs cannot win, without cheating, So it broke my heart when he didn't make it the second term, and then this guy who pretends to wear a white hat and on a horse to save the day with the hostages, when President Carter was working behind the scenes and got it mostly done, but for the fact that these henchmen that I'll let it go.
Yep.
But anyway,
no, you're absolutely right. There were Republicans who were working behind the scenes, trying to convince it was Iran not to release the hostages until after the election, so that it could be a big victory for Ronald Reagan. Yep.
Yeah, and I never liked this cowboy on with the white hair. It was full of crap, and a lot of people bought it. They lapped it up. They thought it was the greatest thing on earth, and when in fact President Carter was a decent man, the most progressive president who did so much much for this country, but he never, he wasn't one for tooting his horn like the one that's coming into office now. He never whined like the one that's coming into office now. I mean, this man was humble. I love the fact that he taught Sunday school because I did the same thing. You know, but let me tell you, I believe
Maria, a lot of my texters are saying stuff like this, that especially right now, to have Jimmy Carter's funeral right now and to revisit what kind of a man he was versus what we just put into the White House. Oh, boy.
Mm-hmm. I know. Yep. There's no comparison whatsoever, none. But you know what? I think Jimmy's going to be looking over our country. He was a man of faith, honor, integrity. You know, I know he's happy to be reunited with his wife, Rosalind. I thought she was such a gentle soul. And there's not going to be another Carter. There isn't. You know, it was a different age that he grew up. He understood human nature. I think when he was so disappointed with the church he was in previously, that's why he left the church, which is now part of this huge mega thing going on. He decided to switch, and good for him. You know, he was a conscientious person. The fact, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but during World War II, he actually went into, I think it was to stop radiation, a nuclear plant or something like that.
Yes, he was very heroic. He was, he saved a bunch of lives when there was a danger of a nuclear incident.
Right, and a lot of people don't know the lives of many of these great presidents. You know, there have been so many great presidents that, you know, people don't know about. Just like, you know, President Biden has done so much. Even though I had a little issues with, you know, what's his name, the one that before the Bush family, the one that got into trouble with his intern, he did some great stuff too. But right now, I'm just so grateful we had Carter. I am so grateful that we had Jimmy Carter in our lives. He done so much for our country. He loved this country. He loved the people. He was a very honest, very spiritual and mature man, and he would be missed. But I know he's going to be watching over our country.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right, Maria.
Oh, I know I'm right. I'm right.
We need him and an entire choir of angels.
Yeah, exactly. He'll be watching over us. He will.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, I wanted to share. I mean, you're welcome.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a quick break. We're gonna share more texts and phone calls, and you know, it was only 2 days ago that we had the anniversary of the January 6th insurrection. Seems like a long time ago, doesn't it? Well, it wasn't. We've got lots to talk about. We'll get to it right after this.
Podcasts of Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and Amazon. Just search for Joan Esposito.
Hey Google, play WCPT.
Streaming Chicago's progressive talk from TuneIn.
Want to join the conversation?
I'm going to say exactly what I think here.
Got something to say?
Everyone needs to hear what I got to say.
Call Joan now at 773-763-9278 and join the conversation. Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820.
Until 3:15 today, we are taking your texts and your calls. I said earlier that I couldn't keep all of Steve Bannon's legal troubles straight, so one of our listeners texted in, Bannon went to jail for contempt of Congress for not appearing. The $1 million case is still pending. So I have not independently verified that statement, but I will see what I can dig up. Not that spending a lot of time researching Steve Bannon is really anything that I want to spend valuable moments of my life doing, but I may do it anyway. Let's go back to the phone lines right now. Dave from Hoffman Estates is on the line. Hey, Dave. How are you?
Hey, Joan. Yeah, that story with where they released those 11 Yemeni men from Guantanamo after 20 years without a charge, and that then to Oman, and that was the biggest push by President Biden's administration in its final weeks to clear the last remaining detainees who were never charged. And now if those MAGA Republicans or Republicans want to whine about this move of 11, lest they should forget Trump released 5,000 Taliban prisoners from Abu Ghraib prison that time in a secret deal. And who knows? And they went back out on the battlegrounds, and who knows how many other Americans got killed because of Trump's secret deal there. So they come whining or texting on that. You might want to remind them about that.
Yep. And I think what you've touched on is a strategy that some Democrats are talking about, and it's exactly what we should do. What Donald Trump did, and also the whole idea behind what Bernie Sanders is doing, are the promises Donald Trump made. And let's write them up, the ones we agree with, let's write them up in legislation and see if we can get those passed. Bernie Sanders has written legislation that he wants to put forth that would cap credit card interest rates at 10%. Donald Trump said credit card interest rates are too high. So let's do it. And if for some reason it doesn't get through, then we call foul. We call, hey, you said this, and it didn't happen. If we've already got one, you said you were going to lower grocery prices. You haven't even been sworn in yet, and you're saying you're not going to be able to do that because it's hard. When prices are high, it's hard to lower them. Okay, that's another broken promise.
Like others have talked about where the Democrats should be, pushing in that. Well, what about these elected officials of ours? They got a franking privilege. Why ain't they sitting there sending the stuff out to us, saying what great things that was done by the president? During the term.
I have to agree with you, Dave. I really don't think that Joe Biden's communications team served him well. Nope. I really don't. And when Bill Clinton turned the economy around, though I will admit he didn't just leave it to his comms people, Bill Clinton used to pop in to the White House briefing room all the time. And he'd get up there and he'd be like, hey, my economy, pretty great, huh? I did that. That was me. Yeah. Good job. Good job, Bill. Did you see the good job I did? I did a good job. Isn't that great?
Yeah.
And, that's not Joe Biden's style. He's a behind-the-scenes kind of guy.
But, but he was there a long time, 50 years. You should see how that game was played. But, everybody got an ego that wants that job. And and as they were talking, I might have been on Hartman's show, were saying that, even the major TV stations and stuff like that, they just kind of gloss over if they even say anything. So then I guess it's upon the Dick Durbins and whoever the senators are and that from the respective states to use like that franking privilege. And if it's every week or every other week, send out the, hey, we did this, we did that, Mm-hmm. So, but just a couple real quick things so you can get to the others. But on that Greenland and Canada stuff, why would they even want to be controlled by us and have their give up their health care for our lousy health care system?
Yeah, really.
The Europeans have much better health care than ours. So
yes, they do. Yes, they do. And they don't have families going bankrupt because of medical bills either.
Right. And wouldn't it be poetic justice now if there was a huge snowstorm on January 20th?
Oh, that would be so great.
Pray for a heavy snow.
Great. That would be so great. Oh.
Yeah. Just a thought, That,
just
keep the Sharpies away from him, though, so he can't.
If you want something to happen in your career, You have to visualize it. You have to manifest it. Do you think we can all manifest bad weather for the inauguration? I don't know.
That would be great. Just keep the Sharpies away from him, so he doesn't go on the weather map. So
yeah, really.
Anyway, just a thought.
Thanks,
everybody. Yep. All right. Have a good one, Joe.
Take care. Let's go to Chicago, where our good friend Ron is on the line. Hey, Ron, how are you?
Yeah. Oh, pretty good. Of course, the right-wing media is blaming the Democrats for the fires in California, especially Gavin Newsom and the fire commissioner of Los Angeles, who is a woman.
Oh, yeah, I saw those. For those of you who haven't seen it, there was one, was it a Fox person, a Fox host or something? I don't know, somebody. The fire chief out there is a woman, and they were implying that because the fire department was led by a woman, that's somehow part of why these fires got out of control, or that people weren't safe because the department was being led by a woman. Just, really nasty stuff.
Yeah, and actor James Woods, who has a home around there, he came out yesterday and said, well, this fire is because of the liberals and the gays. I always thought he was weird.
He is weird. I know someone who interviewed him for a magazine article, and he, however weird you think he is, trust me, he's weirder.
Yeah. And this is only, unfortunately, this is only part one of the disaster, because the fires are in the mountains, and later when the heavy rains come, they're going to be massive mudslides.
Mudslides, yeah, because the root systems that hold the soil in place are being destroyed. Yeah, this is going to be the gift that keeps on giving.
Right. And one more thing, Prime Minister Trudeau of Canada, he has made an offer to buy Alaska and Minnesota. And, but Canada's, I'd rather Alaska is not for sale, because I think Trump has promised that to Vladimir Putin, too. I think he's going to make a deal.
Yeah, somebody texted me that yesterday, that what's Trump going to do when Vladimir Putin tells him he wants Alaska? But the sad thing? If the price was right, I think Trump would start negotiating with him. Well, we're not going to sell that. Wait, what are you willing to pay? You're willing to pay that much? Oh, well, I think we need to talk about this.
Yeah, I need a percentage, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks for that. Yeah, I realize. James Wood. Yeah, he's not somebody you want to spend any time with. One of the texters said that if you Google him or look at his social media, you'll find a bunch of weirdness. Let's just call it that. Okay. What else are we going to, let's see how much, I don't have time. I'm not going to take another call, but we are going to continue to read texts and take calls for a little while after the news. At 3:15 today, we're going to be talking to State Representative LaShawn Ford. And up until that time at 3:15, we are going to continue to talk about the news of the day, and we are going to continue to take your calls. By the way, for those of you who still subscribe to the Washington Post, and, I know I'm on the fence about it, there are parts and people who work for the Washington Post who I dearly love, and I think they do excellent work. I really hope that Kara Swisher, the tech reporter, is successful in her effort to put together a bunch of investors to buy the Washington Post from Bezos, because she would be amazing at leading a paper like that. Long story short. Okay, in the opinion section, one of their most respected opinion writers is Jennifer Rubin. And unlike many opinion writers, much of the time I agree with Jennifer Rubin. I think she has a lot of common sense. Not 100%, but, nothing's 100%. She wrote, when did this post? This posted yesterday morning. Dems picked the wrong senator for Senate Judiciary leadership. They need a fighter on the committee, not a go-alonger. And it is about Dick Durbin. Dick Durbin, of course, was the head of the Judiciary Committee. But when the new Senate is seated, Democrats will be in the minority, so we will get a minority leader, and that is going to be Dick Durbin yet again. And, she talks about how, yes, Dick Durbin helped get a lot of judges, federal judges, on the bench for Biden. But basically, there were some judges where Republicans put up a fight and Democrats folded. They didn't really defend any of the people who Republicans didn't want. And she doesn't understand why Durbin didn't fight. We have had this conversation. I have had this conversation with you for a while. There are times when Dick Durbin seems like such a traditionalist that he doesn't seem to be able to rise to the moment. And then every once in a while, it's like he gets feisty and this sort of other side of Dick Durbin appears, but it's not there all the time. He's in his early 80s, and he still hasn't decided whether or not he's going to retire. I wonder if Jennifer Rubin's column will make him more likely to dig in his heels or make him more likely to hang up his spurs. We're going to take a break for news. We're going to be back with more after this.
The Thom Hartmann radio program provides all of the intelligence, information, and insight you'll need to win the water cooler wars. Weekdays 11 to 2 right here on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter.
Time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Joan, as always, exceptional work from you. From, your TV days all the way up to today. You're truly exceptional, and thanks for this great show you have.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Again, thanks for being here this Wednesday, January 8th. We're keeping an eye on what are now 4 fires in the Los Angeles area. 4 fires. If you've been watching any of the reporting, some of the reporters are getting in some real trouble. And I certainly hope no reporters, in an effort to bring the up-close and personal story, end up getting sick or injured. It's a difficult situation. We are, for another segment, we are taking your calls and reading your texts. Let's go to the phone lines. Greg from Lake in the Hills is on the line. Hey, Greg.
Hey, Joan.
How are you?
Happy New Year.
You too.
I'm good. Thank you. Yeah, I'm just calling because, we were talking about the things with the Republican Party and they're lying and all sorts of things. I've been observing this for so long. I mean, I'm 67 years old, and I've been watching different TV shows, reading different books over my lifetime. And the thing that turned me on to the concept that the Republican Party is basically one big pile of deception is one of the 60 Minutes shows right around the time when George Herbert Walker Bush was running for the president. And I could not believe what I saw in that special. And real quickly, what it was is a group of people at an airport that were waiting for as a rally for their presidential candidate, George Herbert Walker Bush. And do you know he arrived at that event, and all these people were waiting there for him, but he was a little hungry. So him and his family, they decided to taxi to a different part of the airport, and they went out to dinner and had a dinner. And then they came back, and they arrived like an hour and a half late. And they told their big rally crowd there at the airport hangar that they had been delayed by weather or something, and they apologized for it. And, when I saw that I never looked back. I always says, if this guy, I knew nothing about him at that time, other than he was running for president. That's deception. willing to do that to the people who are out there to support you. You can look it up. It's out there. I've actually downloaded the transcript. I finally found it. And after I looked several times to try to find it because I thought maybe it was just me. But, I mean, it's just a minor thing. It's a small incident compared to what we do today. People say, what difference does it make? But this was like back in the late 80s, the early 90s. That this was, when he was running. He was running, I think it's in, 88, I think it was? I think it was 88. And
I can't remember.
Anyway, yeah, and a great book for the audience out there that might be interested is a book called Pledging Allegiance. And it was right around that time. It was all about that election with George Herbert Walker Bush. And it doesn't bring that incident up. I'll tell you, if you want a good thing where it talks about the moral majority coming online, and it's a really good book.
Okay,
and,
thanks for the recommendation.
It's excellent, and I read that book right when it came out because I had heard about it, and that was kind of like I said, those were kind of I started thinking about the Republican Party and this, particularly the Bush crime family, as the party of deception. They'll just tell you anything they want to get you to believe something, and behind your back, they're out there, stealing you blind.
And I know you're not naive and I'm not naive, Greg. There's always been some obfuscation and some spin involved with politics and, trying to put a good face on even the worst news. But the complete and total bald-face lie, the politician who will gaslight you and tell you that the sky isn't blue, the sky is green today. That kind of lying repeatedly to your face and on media channels and platforms, that's something that I think we would never have thought, back in those Bush years, back in those Carter years, that we would get to. We would have thought back then we would never tolerate something like that, and yet, I don't know. Here we are, and it is a part of our life. And like you, I'm just really tired of it. Not to say that every politician tells the truth 100% of the time, but the quantity and the size of the lies, it's like a tsunami. It's very, very disappointing.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable, except for we're seeing it every day, and now it's just so much in your face. And, the last few days I've heard people letting a little bit of what we used to call swear words slip through. But it's what this guy Trump and his ilk have done to this country. They're bringing out the worst in all of us. And before people would talk about it, and hushed words and everything. Now it's like it's all out in the open, and these guys are winning. And I don't want to say any more because it's angering. But I really enjoy your show. I appreciate your show, as I always tell you, because I do. I listen every day. And I still like to always give my shout out to all of your callers and stuff. The Jim and Dave and Bobby, and I haven't heard him in a few days, but I'm sure that I always forget his name. I don't know why I do have a mental block about it, but anyway, you know who I am, Bobby, and it's geez. I don't want to forget anybody, but I really do. I really appreciate everybody out there, and your voices are part of the show.
Well, I thank you for those kind words, Greg. It means a lot. Thanks for your call today, too.
Yeah.
A couple of texting things I want to share. Somebody else about the wildfires wanted to know if water's available. And actually, some homeowners are being told, because I said there's video in some places of homeowners using garden hoses to try to wet down their houses and their property. In some areas, the fire department is asking people not to do that because fire hydrants are having a lot of trouble. In some places, there have been reports that some fire hydrants ran dry. And when you've got fires like this, I don't know if you've ever been anywhere near a big fire, but you just simply cannot fathom the heat. Because somebody said, well, you know, if everybody like wetted down the greenery, the trees around them, wouldn't that help? And the bottom line is not really. No, not really. Fires like that burn so hot that would evaporate in less than a second. There's a book, if you want to learn a little bit more, not about urban fires like this, but about massive fires in general. It's an older book. It's called Young Men and Fire. And the author might be this, I've got to double check this. It might be the same guy who wrote A River Runs Through It. I might be getting my authors mixed up, but I know the title is Young Men and Fire. And it's about firefighters and what they do and what they go through. And it's an extraordinary, eye-opening book. It's been around for decades, but it is definitely worth your time. Before we go to a break, there's a couple of things I wanted to share with you. Jamie Raskin, Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin was on with Jen Psaki. And they were talking, this was, the idea was that they were going to talk about January 6th, but they also expanded that to a larger discussion about political violence, because there are a lot of people who really fear that with the Trump presidency and with this administration that runs on anger, that we will see an uptick in political violence. And I thought what Jamie Raskin and Jen Psaki, I thought this discussion was really worth your time. Lady B, play that Jamie Raskin sound if you would.
Congressman, do you feel fearful, I don't know, for yourself, for your colleagues, with the potential for these insurrectionists to be pardoned
and
out free?
Well, to your first point, Jen, political violence has been normalized as a way of doing mega business. I mean, we talk about January 6th. We don't talk so much about June 1st, 2020, but that was the day when Donald Trump and Attorney General William Barr assembled a paramilitary police makeshift unit under the direct control of the president and attorney general, and then they unleashed violence on peaceful Black Lives Matter protesters in Lafayette Square so Trump could make his trek over to the St. Stephen's Episcopal Church, where he, lifted somebody else's Bible over his head upside down and made whatever statements he wanted to make, violating the separation of church and state. But they showed they were willing to mobilize government violence against peaceful protesters. On January 6th, they showed they were willing to mobilize Proud Boys and Oath Keepers and right-wing white nationalist paramilitary violence against the government, whatever they needed to get in power and to assault their opponents. That is a rule or ruin philosophy. Either we're going to rule everybody and everything, or we're going to ruin and tear down the possibility of government taking place for others. So that is a dangerous philosophy, and we have to demand that the Republicans renounce that philosophy. They have got to embrace constitutional government, which means sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. But it can't be heads we win, and when we win an election, you respect that, but tails you lose, or tails we lose. That is, if they lose an election, then they're going to try to tear down the whole system of government. And that's where we are now, and that was explaining a lot of the frustration of Democrats today. Would they be actually accepting a peaceful transfer of power had they lost?
That was Congressman Jamie Raskin talking to Jen Psaki about the normalization of political violence. We are going to take a break. We are going to talk with LaShawn Ford when we come right back after this.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
One of the things that State Representative LaShawn Ford from Illinois' 8th District, one of the things he has been working on is fighting the opioid crisis, trying to rein in the overdoses that kill so many people, particularly black men. We have asked LaShawn if he would join us today and kind of give us a status update of where things are. LaShawn, how are you? Happy New Year.
Joan, Happy New Year. Thank you for having me on.
I'm so glad you are here. So I know that this is something that has been reported on by the Sun-Times, by the Tribune, by the State Journal Register, what is going on, what the problem is, how to fight it. Where do things stand right now, and what are you doing in Springfield?
Well, right now we are still doing our job trying to get as much Narcan to the streets to reverse fatal overdoses. We have seen a decline in demographics other than black men. But there's a decline in overdoses on the west side of Chicago and throughout the state. But there is one target area, as you said, and that's black men. And so we're trying to connect black men to make sure that they have a medical home. And that means having a place with a primary care physician and connect them to medical assistant recovery. Medical assistant recovery is where they have a opportunity to have a medical doctor put them on a drug that will prevent them from overdosing. It's prescribed by the doctor. It's approved by the governments. And we know that if they are part of medical assistant recovery, that they can live a normal life and they will not die of an overdose because it substitutes street drugs for a medicine. And it also meets the black man where they're at by making sure that if they need behavioral health services, we're connecting them to behavioral health services.
Is this a demographic, though, that reaches out for health services? Or
you're right. They don't reach out. They don't reach out. But we have the West Side Heroin Opioid Task Force and the South Side Opioid Task Force working together to go to the streets and reach out to them. So we go to hot spots throughout the city, and we actually connect with people, whether they're black man, white man, whoever you are, we're connecting with them. And I do believe that with the work of the task force, we're going to see a decline in the overdoses.
In one of the articles that I have, one of the people associated with the task force, Vanya Burford-Berry, said that it seems like there's a blind spot when it comes to prioritizing black men, older black men, and drug usage. Is there a blind spot, and how do we get rid of that?
And making sure that we take away the stigma of men being vulnerable to exposing themselves to their vulnerabilities. A lot of times men feel strong and feel that they have the power and the will to overcome the struggle.
Like you hear with alcoholics, I can quit anytime. I can quit anytime I want to.
Yeah. And the pressure, when you tie it all together, the black male is under a lot of pressure. Not that everyone isn't under pressure, but let's just look at the facts. The criminal justice system seems to have more black men incarcerated and with felonies, which means that demographic is more likely to be unemployed or underemployed because they can't find a job with felonies. And so when you have that type of challenge,
it can even be hard to find a place to live. If a landlord has a choice of three people who want to rent an apartment and one has a felony record, well, you kind of can't blame the landlord for going with the other folks.
Yes, and that's what's happening. So homelessness is a big problem for these black men. So when you think about life's pressures, and like I said, Joan, everybody, regardless of whether you're white or black, you have pressures, and I definitely want the black community to recognize that everyone has pressures, but I want the white community to recognize that there is a disproportionate pressure when it comes to black men.
Are we talking what age demographic are we talking about here?
Older men. It's men, older men, 50. I think it's 55.
Really? Because, I don't know. Maybe this is my own ridiculous prejudice, but when I think of drug problems, I think of younger people. I don't think of somebody who's 50 plus as being at risk for something like this. But that's just my own particular oddity, because of course it's true.
Yes, it's a challenge, and I just think that I would encourage black men to, one, seek a medical home. That's going to be very helpful.
I like the way you put that. Not just find a doctor or a hospital, but seek a medical home. That makes it seem more nurturing and supportive.
You have to know, and I think everyone should know their doctor. And so we go into these facilities and we let the doctor sometimes treat us like a number, and you just go through the process, and you really don't try to take notes, to ask the doctor questions before you go in, so that you could get some more direct care, some care that is more tailored towards your health. For instance, Joan, that I had prostate cancer, and my routine health screening at my age did not ask me to have prostate screening, but because of the work that I do and the people that have taught me so much as a state representative, I knew that I should have a prostate cancer screening. And because of that, they found that I had prostate cancer, and we were able to remove it, and I'm cancer-free today. Congratulations. Thank you.
That means a lot. But you're absolutely right. And there are a number of people who seem to be reluctant to, especially men. I don't know, LaShawn, what it is about men. They have this sort of, I was reading an interview with a pretty high-profile, famous guy, and he was like, I probably should get a doctor. I've never had one. And the guy was like 65. I just, except for the ones like you who've learned that you have to be aware of this stuff, so many people just seem to think, nothing's hurt, nothing hurts, nothing's fallen off, I must be okay.
And you know what? That's, Joan, I think this is where it comes in at, where it says that men that are married seem to live longer.
That's because of us.
Yep. I think women tend to make sure that their husbands, for the most part, visit their doctor.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think so, too. I absolutely think so, too. Well, I really appreciate you updating us on this. This is good stuff. And over the next 4 years, we're going to need people who are doing good things to talk to us and remind us that there are people like you, LaShawn, out there doing good things to make people's lives better. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. You have a great day.
You too. We are going to take a break. We're going to be back with more after this.
Take Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, with you on the go by using the TuneIn app on your phone. Just search for WCPT 820.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
We try to keep an eye on what is happening in states other than those that we are adjacent to. We try, obviously, we look at Wisconsin and Indiana and Michigan and Illinois. That's second nature. But it is important in these years going forward, or let's just start with 2025. It is important for 2025 to know what is going on in the rest of the country, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Casey Harrison is the political correspondent at the Nevadan, which is a Courier newsroom publication, and is here to tell us everything we need to know about Nevada. Casey, how are you doing? Happy New Year.
Joan, I'm doing great. Happy New Year to you, and thank you so much for having me today.
So let's start. I know that you've done some reporting on what's going on on the national level and how that affects Nevada, but let's look right now at the state level. Tell us about the state legislature and what it's doing, who's doing good things, and who maybe we should keep an eye on.
So actually, one of the tricky things about the state of Nevada is that we are one of the only states left in the nation. I know Texas is like this as well, but Nevada has a part-time legislature. So in our state, that means that they meet for a 6-month period every other year. So the last time they convened was June 2023, and the new session will begin, I believe, February 3rd. So before that, in the interim, there hasn't been a whole lot of activity, honestly, dating back to sine die, or the end of the legislative session last year. So really, I mean, coming from Michigan, and, I've lived in the Midwest all my life, and, growing up, they had a full-time legislature. Coming here, it was really sort of I don't want to use the term mind-boggling, but it's strange, certainly, to just understand, like, how do you sort of function a government in the year 2024 and the year 2023 when they don't meet that often? I think the difference between Texas, it's such a big state that the governor there, they're not hesitant to call a special session, for anything. Whereas here in Nevada, I mean, it is very, very rare to get a special session. At the end of the last one, there was a special session just to basically more or less get the funding bill for the baseball stadium for the relocating Oakland A's here and get that all squared away. But other than that, it's very rare.
And are people satisfied are people satisfied with that? I mean, I guess, it certainly would be, you'd have to pay your state legislators less. Maybe it's less of a tax burden. Does it seem weird to the people of Nevada that they don't have full-time representation at the state level?
I think they either, for the most part, don't. Because it's always been like this, they don't know what it would be like to have a full-time legislature. And the fact that Nevada's population is so transient, right? You have people moving in, they stay for 3 or 4 years, and then they're already out somewhere else. So I think, combined with that, plus the financial element to it, I was talking with some sources here after the election, and we were just sort of spitballing about, the nature of the part-time legislature. And they said that there have been internal workings just sort of projecting what it would look like. It would be a really big tax burden, and they think that would be a hard sell for the people. I think maybe one possible solution, and there isn't any activity on this, so don't take this as I'm reporting it, but I think one possible avenue would be through like a voter referenda and having the people decide. But yeah, I mean, it really is just crazy because a lot of the times too, these state legislatures, they're not making a lot of money, especially here in Nevada. Like, I did a story last year about a lawmaker who actually had to drive Uber and do like some of the meal delivery services just to sort of make things happen while they were up in session still and being lawmakers. And so a lot of the lawmakers here, they work full-time jobs outside of their duties as a legislature. There's several teachers, there are lawyers, there are tradesmen. There's just a wide array of people who come to the legislature, and I guess that's cool because it at least gives a perception that special interests aren't that beholden. Whether that's true in reality, I think that's definitely questionable, but I don't know. It's just it's a very interesting dynamic that I just can't believe that we're still dealing with here in 2025.
Wow, I did not realize that there was a part-time legislature. So when they're scheduled to come back in session this February 3rd, are there any huge issues they'll be wrestling with?
Yes. So before we sort of get to the start of the legislative session, Governor Joe Lombardo, who actually will be dining, I saw a report this week that he'll be dining with President-elect Trump at Mar-a-Lago, but he will be giving the State of the State address here in the next week to 10 days. That, I think, will sort of prime what he is looking at to get done through the legislative session. In my opinion, I think that because Democrats have control of the state Senate and the state Assembly, and with the Republican as a governor, I think it's going to look a lot like the 2023 session. And that was Lombardo's first. And it was, again, the same case where Democrats had both chambers of the legislature. And through that period, Lombardo vetoed, I think, 70-something bills, which was the most by any governor in Nevada, or the most of any Nevada governor through a legislative session. A lot of those bills focused on things like renter protections and things of that matter. And so I think we're going to see a similar iteration of that so far. I think from the people I've talked to, housing, again, is going to be a big issue, affordability. And on the Republican side of things, I think, Lombardo really campaigned on expanding Nevada's school choice. The one thing about Nevada is I think they rank pretty routinely in the 48, 49, 50 range in education. So that was his big pitch when he was running for governor as a way to sort of revitalize the school system here. So I think that'll be a big sticking point. I've seen some analysis from some of the conservative writers in the market here saying that, it would be smart for him to prime his reelection bid, cozy up to Trump a little bit more. I've always viewed Lombardo as a pretty down-the-middle moderate Republican, but as we get closer to the election, he's up for re-election in 2026. It wouldn't surprise me if we saw some movement on maybe like transgender athletes in sports, for example. The University of Nevada, Reno women's volleyball team, they protested a game. They sat out a game in December, I think, against San Diego State. In which it was the volleyball team, and they had a trans athlete on that team. So the team decided to forfeit that match, and it was sort of a big news topic here. And they got the support from the governor there. So,
they wouldn't play the other team because there was a trans athlete on the other team.
Correct.
Ugh.
Yeah, I mean
that's not nice.
I covered college athletics in college. I graduated in 2019, and this was never an issue before. And I don't know. I think we are definitely heading into an interesting time with just the discourse where it's at nationally. But those are some of the things that I think we could expect to see in Nevada with this upcoming legislative session.
Wow. By the way, when the governor goes down to Mar-a-Lago, Casey, will you be traveling with the governor?
I will not.
Oh, no. We need to have a reporter there on the grounds.
Well, maybe next time. I didn't get the media advisory on this one, so maybe next time.
Okay. I want to talk to you. I wonder, you know what, Casey, we should, I don't want to start a new topic when we need to take a break. So Casey Harrison and I, Casey's the political correspondent at the Nevadan. It's a Courier newsroom publication. We're going to take a break, and we are going to come back with more about what is going on in that state.
If you've missed any of today's show, you can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Amazon, or HeartlandSignal.com. Just search for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Serving my country required sacrifice that changed my life forever. I remember the day I came home. Because of my injuries, this house wasn't right for me anymore. I remember the narrow doorways, the small bathrooms, the shelves out of reach when in my wheelchair. Every day was full of obstacles. I felt trapped. I remember a better day, the day my family received a specially adapted custom home from Homes for Our Troops. That day changed everything. Now we have a safe and accessible home to enjoy the freedom I fought for. This place, our home, is exactly what we needed to rebuild our lives.
Homes for Our Troops builds and donates specially adapted custom homes nationwide for severely injured post-9/11 veterans and enables them to rebuild their lives. Join our mission at hfotusa.org.
You're listening to WCPT 820 because facts matter.
Don't turn that dial. Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, returns right now.
A fair balance where the facts come out.
On WCPT 820.
And I'm joined by Casey Harrison, who's the political correspondent at the Nevadan, all of the news in Nevada. Casey, this isn't politics, but I was wondering if you could weigh in. I follow a few people out in California who are involved in film and television. And they have, and I used to, before I got mad at them, I used to subscribe to the LA Times. But for the last, year or two, people have been bemoaning the industry out there. Everybody thought that when the strikes were settled, the industry would come roaring back, and it has not. And some people out there are pointing to the fact that television and film has moved to, well, not only to other places outside the country, but also other places inside the country. There is a big production facility that most people know about in Georgia. Netflix does a lot of work there. And I read that the star Mark Wahlberg was working with, I don't know whether it's also Netflix, but some organization to create a huge studio system in Nevada. And that, the people are saying Gavin Newsom has said that he wants to increase the tax breaks given to the industry, but since he needs legislative approval, the first relief of that kind won't come probably at the earliest till next summer. Meanwhile, some other states, Texas, Georgia, Nevada, are making big pushes to try to capture part of this market share. How far along is that project? Do you know anything about where it stands?
Actually, it's funny that you mentioned Mark Wahlberg because he was at the state legislature in 2023, and I was actually up there the day that he was speaking to lawmakers. He was lobbying, or, I don't know if lobbying is the actual correct term, but he was there to sort of persuade lawmakers to go through with this proposal that would have given a lot of different tax incentives and abatements. I believe it was Universal Studios at the time, and that bill didn't get across the finish line. So I think Universal has sort of taken their foot off the gas a little bit. And from what I've understood, I'm not I haven't been as up to date with this story, but everything that I've read is that Sony is now pursuing more or less sort of the same kind of project. And so that is a project that lawmakers here really want to get across because there's always been this big push to diversify Nevada's economy. Of course, gaming and tourism and hospitality makes up the overwhelming majority of it. And again, sort of coming from Michigan, how Detroit is so dependent on the automobile industry, that's a lot of what I sort of gathered out here in Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. So lawmakers really think that this is an opportunity. They think that could not only create a pipeline for young students because they're asking Sony and some of the other stakeholders involved to provide for internships and things that will be baked in that will benefit people from Nevada that hope to work in film and media and things like that. But I think, this will be a big emphasis of the legislative session, but I think that there's still a lot of work left to be done. So it'll be interesting to see how it shapes up. But in terms of the proposal itself, I don't know. People have a lot of different opinions when it comes to giving out tax credits. The lawmakers, both Republican and Democrat, who I've talked to, especially in 2023 when Universal was trying to get through their project, they all seem to agree that this is bringing jobs to Nevada that weren't here before. It makes a lot of sense, too, because Las Vegas is only a 4.5 hour drive, depending on traffic, to LA. So a lot of people said that it's beneficial because, it would sort of be like a satellite campus to all the California-based studios. So, I could see this getting across the finish line, but I think there's still a lot of things that need to be hammered out first.
Well, I know that the reason that the Los Angeles area originally became the basis for the industry was because the weather was so nice, and so they could do so much outdoor shooting, without having to worry about rain or gray skies. And it certainly seems that Nevada would fit that bill too. I mean, there's some serious heat. I don't know. Maybe it'd be an air conditioning problem, though, Casey.
Yeah, no, I think, from the months from like October to April or May, that's really the most temperate time here. Currently, let me look at my phone real quick. I think it's 65 right now. 57. 57, wow. But the sun is out, clear skies.
It's cold.
Not to brag or anything, because I know how gray and cold the Midwest can be in the winter. But, as far as the extreme heat goes, that very well could be a challenge for filmmaking and media, if you're trying to get something done in those summer months, and maybe that's when you pack up and you take all your stuff back to LA. But also at the same time, too, if you're doing a lot of cinematic shots, or if you need shots where maybe actors aren't necessarily doing a whole lot, because 120, it's very hot, and you really should probably only be outside for, less than 30 minutes. But, in the event of 100 degrees, 105, 110, you can be outside for maybe an hour or two, as long as you're staying hydrated, as long as you make sure that you're not losing electrolytes and staying healthy. But, I think Las Vegas makes a lot of sense because of its proximity to LA and because of just some other factors as well.
Well, Casey, I want to shift back to your true area of expertise, politics. Tell me about your Democratic Attorney General, Aaron Ford, I believe his name is.
Yes. So Aaron Ford, he had a pretty busy December. He announced in mid-December that he would be running for Nevada governor, so he'll be seeking the Democratic Party's gubernatorial bid. And he right now is the only person who has announced a challenge to Governor Lombardo. So Ford was first elected as the Attorney General in 2018. He's term limited now, which is why I sort of think he's turning his focus to the gubernatorial race. And of the Democrats that have been sort of rumored to run, I think Ford has always been the most surefire. He has been a very bright, young. He's a very big advocate for consumer protections. His office was very instrumental in securing billions of dollars for the opioid settlements for people that were impacted here in Nevada. And he was a really big proponent of the Kroger-Albertsons merger that was blocked in December by some federal judges. So in terms of Democratic Party establishment figures, I think he's about as a heavy hitter as you could want to take on Lombardo. I don't think Lombardo is also again, he's a very down the middle guy, and I think that's what helped him sort of rise to power and get elected in 2022. It'll be interesting here because I don't see a huge buzz of enthusiasm, but Aaron Ford is a very bright person, and his office has done a lot of good things for the state so far. Interesting.
Tell me about the state itself. Is it like many states in the Midwest where the more sparsely populated rural areas tend to be more red, the urban areas tend to be more blue? How would you describe the overall politics of Nevada?
Well, that's a really good question, and I think this election sort of turned everything on its head.
Okay.
If you would have asked me before the election, I would have said that Nevada is a very light purple state, but probably more on the blue side of things. And I think to an extent that is still really true. In talking with some Democratic Party officials, obviously Donald Trump carried Nevada. He was the first Republican since George Bush in 2004 to win the state in a presidential race. But Democrats largely won pretty much everything down the ballot. Like I said, they retained control of the state assembly and the Senate. The three incumbent U.S. representatives in the House, they all won re-election, and Democratic Senator Jackie Rosen narrowly won her bid over a challenger.
That was a squeaker.
And that was a very, very close one. It was actually closer than the race between Catherine Cortez Masto and Adam Laxalt back in 2022, and that race was decided by fewer than 8,000 votes. Actually, it wasn't closer. I'm sorry. But it was I think the margin on that was only 1.5%. It was a very, very, very close race.
So how would you describe Nevada post-election now that your view is a little different?
So actually today, the Secretary of State's office, they send out basically something near the beginning of every month showing the new total of active registered voters. And this time a year ago, Democrats had something like a 40,000 person advantage in the party registration totals. But the email that went out today showed that there are currently 626,000 Nevadans that are registered as Democrats and 622,000 registered as Republicans.
Wow.
And so that number has really been cut down to 4,000 now. Republicans, in 2020 and 2022, the prevailing narrative here was they had no ground game, they had no outreach effort, and there's an apparatus here called the Reid Machine, named after late Democratic Senator Harry Reid, who worked really hard with, groups like the Culinary Union and some others in town to basically have the most robust door-knocking, canvassing apparatus this side of the Mississippi. And it worked for a long time, and this is the first time that we saw it falter. And, it had worked pretty reliably up until this point. But I can tell you, I had thought, if you'd asked me a day or two before the election, I'd thought Harris was going to win. But when I was out there on Election Day talking to people, waiting in line at their precincts, it was overwhelmingly, most people were out there for Trump.
Wow.
And so it just goes to show. And even the Trump campaign, this time they had people out in front of precincts. They were marked off where they were supposed to be, but they were giving pamphlets and brochures and information, and I wasn't seeing a lot of that on the Democratic side. So, I'm sure if you talk to Democratic officials in the state, they're going to regroup and they're going to come back better than ever. But I think it goes to show you just how things can change in a matter of seconds. And, well, I guess it's a matter of 4 years. But, just because a state has been trending one way for a while doesn't always mean that it'll necessarily be that.
When you talk to those voters, what did they say? Did they just say they were voting for Trump, or did you ask them why? And why? That's what I want to know.
I think the big thing, honestly, was affordability. Nevada they were very hit disproportionately hard by the pandemic. Sorry about that. My neighbor's making some sound. So, what were we talking about? Sorry, just the train.
When you talked to the Trump voters, why they said they were voting for Trump?
Yes. So affordability was one of the really big things in that nature. Like I said, we were really hit hard by the pandemic. I think our unemployment at one point reached like 30% in the first month or two of COVID. So you saw that in 2022 where voters punished the governor for just by virtue of being in power, and then they elected the Republican. I think there are a lot of similarities here. In 2022, I remember filling up for almost $6, $7 a gallon. Like, it was really, really expensive here for a minute, and groceries were really bad. And of course, you know, I could tell you that there are a whole lot of international factors. And I think if you told me, or I think it's really lost on us that, yes, the pandemic is now going on 5 years old, and, you know, it seems like old news, but that was a magnitude, the magnitude of that event, I don't think we'll fully understand for decades. Yeah. And I think the reverberations of that we're still feeling to this day. But people don't want to hear that. If eggs are $4 a dozen and it's $3 for a loaf of bread, and, you know, you're spending hundreds of dollars a week on groceries, I think people just are fed up and they're going to look for a change. And with the bird flu taking root in this country, I've read that, you know, forget about eggs coming down in price anytime soon. They're likely to go up in price. Some people are speculating that the price of eggs will double because of the bird flu epidemic. And I wonder if they'll hold Donald Trump responsible for that if they're paying $10 a dozen for eggs. What do you think? Two things on that front. So back to 2022 for a second. I actually, there was a bird flu outbreak then, and eggs got really expensive. And I actually did a story about people in Las Vegas who resorted to buying chickens from like Tractor Supply Company and from local farmers and whatnot so that they could start doing their own eggs. But I think, you know, as tactile as Trump is, I think that's exactly, you know, he's going to find a way to blame somebody else. And the unfortunate thing is I think most of his base will believe him. Mm-hmm. I mean, they call him Teflon Don for a reason, right? I mean, he has been able to evade any kind of responsibility or conviction for anything. And so, you know, if prices do go up, he'll find some boogeyman to blame it on, and nobody will ever think twice because, you know, it's not like it was Biden's fault that eggs got expensive, you know, 2.5 years ago.
Right. Casey, it's been wonderful to talk to you about Nevada. I learned so much in this conversation. We'll have to talk again when your part-time every other year legislature is getting ready to meet again and see what's going on there. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Joan. Appreciate it.
Casey Harrison, political correspondent at the Nevada Courier newsroom publication. We are going to take a break for news. We're going to be back with more after this.
Hey, where's Hal Sparks? I'm not sure where he is now, but I know where you can find him Saturdays at 11. He'll be right here on WCPT 820 for the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide. Alexa, play WCPT.
WCPT from TuneIn.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
I want somebody who's passionate. I want somebody who can talk to people like a real person, who can make people feel things, who can make people want to follow them.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
I am joined by David Schultz, welcoming him back to the program. He's a professor of political science at Hamline University and somebody who I really enjoy talking with about our politics, a subject that is going to be more and more untethered to reality, I think, as time goes on. David, welcome back. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, and thank you for having me again, and I hope all is well.
Well, all was well up until this morning. My partner, Ray McKenzie, is locked in a guest bedroom. He tested positive for COVID this morning. As soon as I get off the air, I'm headed to the drugstore to get him some Paxlovid, and I swear, David, if he gets me sick, I will kill him. Forget the COVID. I will be responsible for the homicide in this house. Other than that, David, I'm great.
I was going to say, I think part of being in a relationship is the fact that we wind up infecting one another over a long period of time or something like that. I know.
So I'm a little disillusioned that the chaos is starting so early. It really seems to me that not only Joe Biden, but also Kamala Harris have really sort of checked out. And except for some, I think maybe Chris Murphy, maybe Jamie Raskin, there doesn't seem to be anybody in a high-level Democratic elected position who really wants to pick up the sword and rally us all behind them to fight the fight that's coming for the next 4 years. It feels to me like right now there's a little bit of a power vacuum. But maybe, David, maybe you see something I don't. What am I missing?
No, I think you're right at this point. There's the incredible shrinking Joe Biden at this point in the sense of, right after the election, he already seemed to be disappearing. And for all you're getting for the last few weeks, now part of it's, I think, some of the media bias, the mainstream media bias in terms of their focus on Donald Trump. But all the major announcements, everything that seems to be happening now is not with the Democrats who still, who still have control of the Senate and could do some things. It's still not with Biden, who, as far as I know, is still president for 2 more weeks. Everything is on Trump setting the agenda at this point, or Trump meeting with people. And again, the news that you were doing before I came on here, even Biden seems to be, saying, well, geez, I'm not sure if I got elected, what I could have done or something like that. So, I mean, there's just this disappearance, and almost as if the election took the will to fight out of everybody at this point. Unlike, 8 years ago, or after the election when Trump won, the will to fight, the will among the progressives was there. This time, I just feel like there's just nobody rising to the occasion, or no, plan. No plan for what to do, while at the same time, Trump and his supporters seem to be laying out a plan about what they want to do. So there's no counter being developed at this point.
Exactly. I was reading that when Barack Obama was elected to the presidency, that the Republican leadership from Congress and Senate, they booked a room. It was either like at a restaurant or someplace like that. And while the transition was going on, they were meeting and they were planning. And out of that, Kevin McCarthy was in that meeting. I'm trying to remember who else. Out of that meeting came the plan that the game plan they all followed. We will object to every piece of legislation he tries to move forward. We will do everything in our power to make him a one-term president. We will oppose him at every turn. And I would love to believe that somewhere, that Chuck Schumer, I don't know who else, that, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries and the other leadership as it exists, are they meeting behind closed doors? What are we going to do? What's the game plan going to be? How are we going to present a united front? I don't see it happening, and I'm very disappointed about that.
I'm disappointed by it, too. But I want to take us back even further in time. Take us back to 1980 when Ronald Reagan wins the presidency. And there's all types of stories about how him, Ed Meese, who was eventually his attorney general, and others, from the time they got elected, there's like roughly a 3-month period, quite a bit of period. They were working really hard to lay out the agenda. They were laying out what they wanted to do legislatively. They were already planning in terms of how to do Supreme Court and lower federal court nominees. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is that the Republicans have figured this out going back, nearly 50 years, that you win and you plot your strategy. You have a game plan in place. And there's really no indication that, during the last 50 years that the Democrats have learned that aspect from the Republicans. I mean, when Obama took office, they weren't sort of planning in advance in terms of saying, well, here's the stuff that we want to do. They were reacting to the crisis that Bush had left for them when Biden takes over, in 2020 or 2021, the same thing. And so I don't see the Democrats doing that planning. So on one level, it doesn't surprise me, but disappoints me that they're not planning a counter strategy to say, okay, we know that the Republicans have done this taking office. They know they plan to obstruct us. How do we now undertake a loyal or opposition strategy to foil them? All I'm seeing is coming from maybe interest groups talking about what they're going to do, but certainly not from the organized Democrats.
Yeah, and I think it's going to have to be somebody maybe who doesn't have the big stage right now. I mean, everybody's talking about how, it was the blue-collar workers, it was the rank-and-file union workers voting against their own interests who voted, Donald Trump back into office. And yes, we cannot at this point quantify the misogyny or the racism that went into the election. But it seems to me that the only person currently in a high-profile Democratic position that fits this whole I'm a blue-collar person, I can talk to you idea would be somebody like John Fetterman. And I don't know what his aspirations are or aren't. I don't know if his health issues would preclude him from higher office. But it almost seems to me like somebody I follow on social media who hasn't really been in government for a while is Robert Reich. And he looks at the camera and he's like, this is ridiculous. This is what's happening. This is why it's happening. And this is what you need to know. And don't believe anybody who says this, that, or the other thing. We need somebody, God help me, who can talk to people. Chuck Schumer is, I'm sure, extremely bright, but he comes off as so professorial. And I think that is what has helped people label Dems as elites. When Dems do more for working people than the Republicans have ever dreamed of doing for working people. But the way they talk to people, let's not talk about your concerns. Let me talk about policy and the origin of my new policy. And I just don't think that resonates with people. If that sort of talk resonated with people, we wouldn't have Donald Trump getting reelected. Is there anybody you see who you think could personify what we need?
I don't at that point, beyond maybe a Fetterman or something, and that's exactly the issue that we have to be thinking about here, is that the fact that the Democrats are coming across as elitist, or the fact that they've not learned how not just talk, but I'm going to say something even more importantly, they don't know how to listen to the working class. And I think that's really the far more important thing. I mean, the thing that, I don't agree with Donald Trump, on a gazillion things, but I have to give him credit for one thing, and it's his ability to resonate the fears, maybe the prejudices, maybe all of it, of what a lot of people feel. And a lot of times, sometimes people, and it's with our friends. Sometimes our friend talks to us and they just want to kind of vent, and we've all learned not to give them advice, when they want to vent, just let them talk, something like that. What Trump does is gives a lot of people the ability to vent because he sort of looks like he hears them. And what the Democrats, I think, first step has to be is not talking a different language, but listening and realizing that. And again, I've seen this at least a couple times in the past year where a lot of the Democrats think, well, okay, this is just a one-off. It was Reagan or it was Trump or it was the economy or something. When the working class regain their sanity, they'll come back to us. And that kind of strategy doesn't work. There has to be, and it may be a combination of shifting in terms of both the messaging and the message. But a lot of my students will ask me, for example, question along the lines of, well, what do average people think about such and such? And I'll say to them, well, let's go down to, and I'm trying to think of a good example in Chicago. Maybe you could help me here, but like a place where just sort of like working class people hang out. And I'll say to them, go down to such and such a place. Yeah, something like that. I say, go down there and go have a couple of beers and go listen to some people and see what's on their minds. And I think that's where Democrats need to go. And what Fetterman does does that in a genuine way too. And what I mean by a genuine way, he's real about who he is. He's not trying to come across and sort of fake it or something like that. He is who he is. But there's such I think a mobilization right now in the party against that, sort of thinking that, well, we know better than the working class. They don't know well what they're thinking, or if they come back to their senses, they'll come back to us. In some sense, I'm going to say something really odd here. In some sense, it was actually bad that Biden won 4 years ago, and follow my thought here, because when Biden won, it made Democrats think, we've beaten Trump. It's like putting the wooden stake in the vampire's heart. He's done. We don't have to worry about him. We've regained the blue wall. Everything is fine again, et cetera, et cetera. And even though I'm glad Biden won, but there was that complacency that kicked in. That's what I'm really getting at here. The complacency that kicked in 4 years ago to think, Trumpism, the Trumpistas, they're all gone. When in fact, they're not going away for a while. And we need to be thinking about the new reality of how to play a different game of politics than we've been playing for the last few years.
Yeah. In talking about the way Democrats need to listen to people and talk to people, I think that even though he was very, very brave and has paid a very high price for his bravery, certainly Adam Kinzinger, like Liz Cheney, they're definitely very conservative folks. You look at the voting record when they had the opportunity, and there's no liberalism, there's no progressiveness there. But particularly Adam Kinzinger, I think, really knows how to talk to people in the way people talk to one another. He was just on the Colbert Late Show on CBS. And this one clip, and for those of you who've listened this week, I played this clip a couple days ago. But to me, this is the honesty, the bravery, the courage that I would like to see Democrats embody. Stephen Colbert is asking him about, these pardons that Joe Biden is being asked to sort of preemptively issue, particularly for anybody on the January 6th committee. And he's asking Kinzinger what he thinks about that, if he's interested in a pardon. And the whole exchange is really interesting. Listen to this.
Bernie Sanders says that he thinks Biden should offer preemptive pardons to a host of different people, including the people in the January 6th committee. I know that you said on CNN that Anderson Cooper asked you point blank, would you take a pardon if offered to you? And your answer was?
No.
Why?
No. Because I didn't do anything wrong.
Okay.
Look, if Donald Trump wants to come after me, look, do I want him to come after me? Of course not. But if he decides to, I'll be twice as much of a pain in his backside, because I will, from my cell in jail, continue to remind the American people that this is not the country we live in. This was not the country that the Constitution represents, and I'll continue to call him out. So if that's what my next thing of service is doing it from a jail cell, okay.
Why can't we get somebody like that, being that passionate, that moral, on our side, David?
I wish I could give you that answer, but let me approach it a different way here. Is that, again, the roots for Trumpism and for the conservative takeover didn't happen overnight. This was not just suddenly, oh, crap, it's 2016, Trump has won. How did that happen here? What the Democrats need to be thinking about here, and what progressives need to be thinking about here, is the building of the long game. And this is where, again, I give the Republicans credit. It started perhaps back in the 70s and 80s when it was maybe social protest movements. It was running for school boards. It was maybe years later, those people from the school boards are now running for city councils or state legislatures, et cetera, et cetera. It was building networks that included interest groups, community organizers. It was the Federalist Society in terms of lawyers in the courts. And again, this gets back to our comment earlier where we talked about how the Republicans, before Obama took office, were planning from before day one how to oppose him. There needs to be some type of broader strategy among groups to say that we're not going to win this tomorrow, but we've got to plan longer. Look at the efforts to overturn Roe versus Wade a couple of years ago, in abortion rights for women, didn't come out of nowhere. This was a 40-year plan or 40-year development among the Federalist Society, among Republicans, among stacking of the Supreme Court. This is the long game that Democrats and I'll put it this way, the progressives need to play if they want to win this game.
But we don't have the capability to play the long game. We want it. We want it now. We want the short term. I'm sorry, unless you consider the long game between now and the midterm elections. Yeah, I'm sorry. I can't. No, I can play the long game as long as you can provide me with some short-term wins to satisfy me. But no, I don't think I've got that. And clearly, maybe that I'm the typical Democrat. Yeah.
Well, this becomes now the question of what is the short-term goals? Because the 2026, right? Okay, 2026 elections are already upon us in terms of thinking about it at this point. If you look at the lineup here, there's going to be more Republicans up for election in the Senate than Democrats. We have, as we know, a razor-thin House of Representatives at this point. If the Democrats start to think now, even for, let's say, the game for the next 2 years, what can you do to obstruct? What can you do to fight what the Republicans are going to try to do? That's good short game. That's good short game at this point, which can build. Long game has to build upon short game, if we can use that metaphor here. Mm-hmm. That you get the early victories, you build support, you bring more people on board. But again, this becomes part of a strategy, and it gets back to our first part of our discussion here: is that what do the Democrats want to do for the next, let's say, 18 months or 2 years or something like that? Because we know the things that are going to be happening. It's going to be to try to make the tax bill permanent. It's going to be horrible things on immigration. It's going to be a tax on the EPA, et cetera, et cetera. And right now, I think what the Democrats are hoping is similar to what happened 8 years ago. I mean, there's a contradiction, and I'm going to call it Trump 1.0, which was his first term, and Trump second term, I'm going to call it 2.0. In Trump 1.0, tell me if you agree or not, there was a contradiction. On the one hand, Trump wanted to move an agenda, but on the other hand, his ineptitude or hatred for government was so great that he basically incapacitated the government from being able to do as many things as he could possibly do. When I look at his appointments right now, when I look at the people who he's staffing here, he's got the same contradiction. He wants to move an agenda, but he's not putting people and structures in place that are going to make it possible for him to do that. So if the Democrats can act, and the Democrats and the progressives can do whatever they can to make it even harder and harder for Trump to do things, and push him on that, I hate to say this, on his destructive tendency. I mean, that's a terrible thing for me to say here. But in some sense, what they have, I think the Democrats are hoping for is that Trump is just so inept the second time around, he won't get very much done. But the Democrats can't simply count on that. They've got to do things to also, to trip him and his administration up.
A week ago, I would have said, but there's Project 2025, and now he knows how to get around the people who thwarted him before, except that I was just reading, you know, when he takes office, there's all this stuff he wants to do, a whole range of things, some of which you just touched on, and he wants it all in one bill, and he wants it addressed during reconciliation. And it was like, well, wait a minute, dude, some of the stuff you want to do is not allowed to be in a reconciliation bill. There are rules for what can be in a bill like that and what can't be. And I was like, because the article was, you know, and basically Trump wants to get a lot done. He may already be sabotaging himself.
That's right.
And he's saying, he said to Mike Johnson, I want one big, beautiful bill, a big, beautiful bill that has everything. And, you know, some people I think it was in the Senate have said, well, you know, maybe we could do not two bills. I want one big, beautiful bill. But don't you understand what the rules are there? You know, if it has to no. So, you know, a week ago I would have said, oh, no, even if he's not gotten any smarter, he's got smarter people advising him. But maybe they are there. Maybe he's just not listening. So it does seem like he is going to sabotage himself right out of the gate. Let's hope so. I was afraid we couldn't count on that.
Yeah, but I mean, think about it. I mean, on one level, it's not very sexy, but the reality is most policy change is incremental. You do smaller chunks of stuff like that. And I know it's kind of boring. Everyone wants the big sweeping change, but if he tries to throw everything in beyond the fact that there's rules out there. The articles that I've seen are suggesting there's an awful lot of people, even in his own party, that are not going to go along with all this stuff in one big bill. Remember, his majority is razor thin. And two, the odds are for some of this stuff, if he throws all this stuff into one big massive, bee's nest or whatever you want to call it like that, the odds are that a lot of this stuff is going to be bad law, bad policy, and it's just not going to work. I mean, I'm going to flip it in a different way and talk about it here, about what I think is the contradiction within his administration. If in fact he's really serious about wanting to do these mass deportations, think about, how much money it's going to cost. It's going to be in the hundreds of billions of dollars to do it, and he's going to need an administrative capacity, the likes of which we have never seen in the United States at this point. I mean, to be able to round up that many people and do the kind of deportations, I mean, it's going to take a government that's so efficient and so huge. I don't think you're going to see at the end of the day either his administration or Republicans say, oh, yeah, we're willing to spend $500 billion or $1 trillion to do this mass deportation on a variety of people. Oh, yeah, and we're going to fund the Department of Homeland Security or whatever and give them hundreds of billions of dollars to be able to do stuff like that. I just don't see that happening in any way, shape, or form at this point. So instead, what Trump winds up doing, and I've been calling what we've been seeing for the last few days a sideshow. You know, a sideshow where him talking about Greenland or renaming the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America. This is all just sideshow stuff at this point, just to sort of distract us from, what other kind of stuff he's doing. But it also speaks to the fact that on one level, he's got the attention span of a gnat. I mean, he just doesn't seem to be able to stay focused on anything at this point, and somehow thinks that if he thinks it's done.
Yeah. I just realized that we have to take a commercial break, David. I'm talking to David Schultz, professor of political science at Hamline University. We are going to talk a little bit about Jimmy Carter when we come right back after this.
The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath, Saturdays at 1 p.m.
I'm thankful, really, that anyone could feel they could call into this show and share their real despair and anger. I am. I can only hope that we can get past the disappointment and the anger with each other to once again focus on these longer-term and very large fights.
The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath, Saturdays at 1 p.m.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 a.m., WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Every weekday afternoon from 2 to 5 p.m. on WCPT 820.
I am joined by political science professor David Schultz with Hamline University. Tomorrow, of course, is the National Day of Mourning for Jimmy Carter. His funeral will be at the Washington Cathedral tomorrow morning. President Biden is expected to deliver one of the eulogies. It is a time, David, when not only are people revisiting Jimmy Carter and his career, but also, according to the texts that I'm getting from listeners, sort of like saying, oh, my God, how did we get, when we were there, how did we get here? It does seem like Jimmy Carter and Donald Trump literally are polar opposites in every way, shape, and form. Will we ever get back to that kind of a life, you think, where we expect our leaders to have some kind of moral character, to be able to take stands, to fight for what's good? Are those days gone?
Well, I hope not, but I'm going to invoke a Jimmy Carter all about that contrast here. People keep talking about, he never actually used the word malaise in that famous speech of his, but I always call it sort of the crisis of American society speech, because I think that was a better description. And part of what he really talks about there is he said something that the American public didn't want to hear at the time, where he basically said the problem of American politics is really the crisis of the American people. And then at one point he says something, and remember his campaign slogan of 76 was on one level of saying a leader is good as the people are. And I say that because to one extent, we're not going to get leaders in terms of the moral character like Jimmy Carter again, unless the American public really demands that. And it's really all about us at this point. And I'm glad the way you set this up here, because I think about, in 1976 when Jimmy Carter is running for office, and the big scandal was him doing an interview in Playboy magazine saying that he lusted in the heart, and people thought this was an absolutely horrible thing to do. How did we get from that to where we have somebody now who's been accused actually convicted of, held liable, for sexual assault and so forth like that? This is something about what the people are expecting. I've taught ethics classes, in public administration programs for years, and I always sort of want to say to people, character matters. But it seems like to 50% of the American public in this last election, character no longer matters. And so I don't know how we get back to that. How do we get to that point where that occurs? The other image I want to think about with Jimmy Carter, and it speaks in a whole different direction here, is that there's a scene after he's inaugurated where he's holding hands with his daughter and his wife, and they walk down the street, and so like the inaugural parade, and there's no visible concern about anybody crazy jumping out and going to try to assassinate him or something like that. And I think about where we are now, where whether it would be Donald Trump, Harris, or Biden, could a president walk out on the street now and do something like that? And it couldn't happen.
Not right now, not with the level of political violence that seems to be a part of who we are now, and not with the easy availability of guns. And even if the most of us, even if the vast majority of us are good, thoughtful people, all it takes, as we've learned over and over again, is one person who isn't balanced, one person who has problems separating reality from fantasy. And that person with a powerful gun can change life as we know it. There was the assassination attempt a very poor assassination attempt against Donald Trump, and then possibly a second one. Remember, they found the guy at the golf course hiding in the woods with a gun. I mean, yeah.
So think about our two pictures here. Picture one, it's 1977, and it's the inaugurational walk by Jimmy Carter and his family. Scene number two, it is January 6, 2021, and it's the rioting at the Capitol. I mean, those are is that the same country we're looking at here? I mean, it's such a difference in terms of those two different pictures here. And unfortunately, right now, we seem still to be closer to the January 6th image than we are to the the January 20th image from 1977.
Yeah. People have lost faith in, I mean, it was always easy to say, politicians are crooked and out for themselves, but it seems to be an accepted belief, not that those politicians are outliers. One thing, though, that I want to ask you about, I've heard people say, because I've talked to people about whether or not MAGA will survive Donald Trump, and a lot of people believe that MAGA needs Donald Trump to really survive, that he's like sort of what they call a once-in-a-lifetime person, that because, we had Ron DeSantis who tried to out-MAGA Trump, thinking that would be his path to victory, and it got him nowhere. And, a lot of the pundits believe that Trump is one of a kind, and that once he's probably going to have to die or be medically severely challenged to leave the scene, that's the only time we will start to see MAGA waning. And part of the reason why I want to ask you this, I was watching Congress, the House, and I believe it was when Kamala was certifying the election. And, for most things, we've gotten used to the fact that if a Democrat says something great, the Democrats clap or do a standing ovation, and the Republicans sit on their hands. And the Republican says something good, and the Republican members of the House jump up, and the Democrats sit on their hands. I don't know if you noticed this. Every time anybody clapped, whether it was for Republicans or Democrats, J.D. Vance clapped. He clapped for Kamala Harris. He clapped all the times that the Democrats clapped, as well as all the times the Republicans clapped. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, buddy, you better not let Donald see you do that, But, and J.D. Vance, who knows what he really thinks? He's such a he's such a Play-Doh character. You can pretty much mold him into any shape you want, depending upon who has the power and who has the money. But I thought that was really interesting. And it made me think, maybe once Donald Trump's gone, MAGA will dissipate. Your thoughts on that?
A couple of different theories. First of it, on one level, if I call him charismatic, I don't necessarily mean people have to like him, but but Donald Trump is a charismatic figure that has intense loyalty tied to his personality, and he's been able to galvanize lots of people for that. So theory one is that if he's gone, the charismatic authority is gone, and the movement kind of dissipates. Theory number two is the fact that the roots of Trumpism, really are far deeper than Donald Trump. I've argued that the roots go back maybe 50 or 60 years. Culturally, they go back to how a lot of working class were turned away from the Democratic Party, especially in the South. When the Democratic Party became the party of civil rights or of reproductive rights and so forth. So there's some sense in which they leave the party because of social issues, but many of the working class also walk away from the Democratic Party because the party doesn't appear to be supporting the working class in the way that it used to, and the perception that it's putting more issues or more emphasis on identity. And the reason why I say that is that if you argue that the social, economic, whatever roots of Trumpism go deep, taking him, the figurehead, away doesn't take away the movement, doesn't take away all the forces that have created that coalition, but it's still and the question becomes, will the Advance or somebody else be able to step in and be able to hold it together? That's really the question. But I think even with Trump out of there, the forces that have created the situation would have brought these people together really has been growing for a long, long time, and I don't see that going away in the short term.
Interesting. So he is a cult figure, but maybe MAGA has now become just such a part of our country that it will outlast him. David, we need to take another break. I'm talking to political science professor David Schultz. We're going to be right back after this.
Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
And I am joined by political science professor David Schultz. David, I'd like to refocus our conversation on the state level. Speaking of bad behavior and Republicans, both in the North Carolina state legislature and in Minnesota, we have seen Republicans attempt or accomplish such blatant partisan power grabs, especially in North Carolina, as all these people, the bulk of them, were voted out of office. And while they still had a supermajority, they did their darndest to take power away from the duly elected officials. And in Minnesota, there are similar shenanigans going on. Is this the new normal? Is this kind of, destroy everything on your way out the door attitude? Is this our new politics?
I'm not going to say it's completely new politics, because you might remember one of our neighbors. Your neighbor to the north is Wisconsin. My neighbor to the east, and before Governor Evers got elected, the Republicans did the best they could. When Evers defeated the Republican governor, to strip the governor's office of as much powers as possible, and so that was the playbook. That's the playbook that was being used in North Carolina in terms of as the Republicans are leaving the door. All right, we're no longer in power, but let's take away power. Let's take away power so that the incoming Democrats really can't accomplish anything. And what's happening in Minnesota at this point, we're a mess on so many scores right now. Is that our House of Representatives deadlocked at 67-67 at this point, which was going to push for kind of a power sharing in the House. But what happened is that there is now one of the Democrats who got elected was declared ineligible for office because he didn't live in his district. So now it's a short-term 67 Republican, 66 Democrat. The Republicans are now trying to make a power grab in the House and saying, okay, we now have enough votes to be able to do what we want to be able to do, at least short-term until the special election. So I do think, again, maybe this still comes back to our opening theme of our discussion here today, is that the Republicans seem prepared to play hardball, seem prepared to be able to, do whatever it takes for them to be able to hold power, stay in power, do whatever's like that. And the Democrats don't fight back. And the Democrats need that strategy again for how to fight back. And I don't know, maybe I don't want to say fight dirty. I hate to use that phrase here, but maybe fight in the gutter. Maybe you have to figure out how to be a street fighter.
Well, that kind of circles back to the very beginning of this discussion. Who do we have that's a street fighter? Who do we have that can speak plainly? Who do we have that can get mad and lead the charge?
Well, like I say, we've got Fetterman, we've got Raskin. After that, it falls off the table pretty rapidly at this point in terms of, I just can't think of anybody. I mean, do you have anybody in Illinois who you would sort of hold up as a model and say, here's a great street fighter for the progressives?
Well, I like a lot of the things that he has been saying, but I don't think anybody with the last name Pritzker would ever be considered a street fighter. However, when Donald Trump was first elected, the only real in-your-face comments I heard a couple from Gavin Newsom and a couple from JB Pritzker. Right. JB was like, you know what? He wants to mess around with Illinois. He's going to come through me. And Gavin Newsom said something, also equally in your face. And then the two of them kind of went silent. And maybe they just figured that they didn't want to annoy him, make themselves a target. I don't know. But no, in Illinois, let me see. No, that would be no. No, David, that would be no.
Yeah, I was going to say, in Minnesota, the answer is no also. There was this window, and I don't think it's going to happen now, is that our Governor Walz, who was the vice presidential nominee for Harris, said after the election, I think I still want to have a role in national politics at this point. But in the 2 months or almost 3 months since the election, his status has shrunk. And partly it's not a surprise. People generally don't look to the people who have lost to be carrying the flag into the battle the next time. Right after the election, people are saying, well, maybe Harris, will be in the next 4 years. I said to one of my colleagues once, it's kind of an academic statement here. One of my colleagues once said to me, I'm interested in studying the role of losers in presidential elections. And I said to him, nobody cares about the losers. And he said, but they're important. I said, they may be important, but no one cares. And that's the same point here, is that Walz, however good of a governor he may have been, just because he was on the losing ticket, he's lost that ability to be able to do that also, too. So you have to find people like the Newsoms. You have to find people like, Pritzker. I don't know if Gretchen Whitmer has it in her either, but she's a winner. She was, so it's people like that who are still perceived as winners.
So you're telling me, okay, I'm willing to give her 2 or 3 days, maybe a long weekend, Kamala Harris, to catch up on her sleep and come to terms with her loss. You're telling me that if she hadn't been out and about in a way that the media could talk to her, that she couldn't have, after she picked herself up off the floor, she couldn't have said, look, it didn't go the way we wanted, but we're going to fight because this is one thing that, like this issue right here, child care. This country needs affordable child care, and I'm not going to stop until we've accomplished that. I think there was a window where the media still would have covered her, still would have listened to her, and if she had been prickly, not mean-spirited, but if she had been prickly and tough, this idea of her running again in 2028, I would have been willing to consider that an option. But the way she has just disappeared, no, you don't get to do that. You don't get to sit home and do nothing and then think somehow your political career is going to continue unabated. If I have to get up here in front of this microphone and fight, then you do too. That was kind of my cranky take on that, David.
No, I was going to say she had this opportunity. As people forget here, this was the closest. This was actually a very close presidential election. 1.5 percentage points difference between the two of them. As I point out to people, had Harris picked up 230,000 more votes in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, she wins an electoral college victory. This is actually a very, very narrow victory for Trump. She could have walked out of this in those remaining, or those few days after the election, and said, the fight's not over, we're going to keep going, et cetera, like that, and build something for her. But the thing that I remember the most of what she said in the few days afterwards was something along the lines of saying, maybe if you heard the same thing, she said, I'm going to go off, eat some food, gain a few pounds, and that's about it. It's kind of like I'm exiting it at this point. Do you remember that quote? Do you hear that? Something like that, something along that lines here. It was obviously a remark about airplane food or something like that. But she basically made it clear she's walking away. And if you looked at her the other day, I mean, she did her ceremonial duties as vice president, on January 6th. But there was like no soul to her at this point. It's like has just walked away from it. Again, getting back to what we talked about earlier, Biden's walked away, she's walked away. They've all kind of sort of thrown up their hands and said, well, it's Trump's world now, and we're going to ride off into the sunset. Yeah,
I can sort of forgive Joe Biden because I'm not sure, frankly, how much stamina he's got.
Right.
But I just can't. If she, and do you think it has anything to do, as near as I can tell, has she lost a major election before? I know that she's won a couple of times on squeakers, but could that be part of it, that she just thought somehow that she would always win, and being dealt this first loss on such a huge scale that it maybe it did suck the life out of her? I don't know.
It's possible. I mean, she, obviously in 2020 she didn't get the nomination, but she gets the consolation prize. She gets to be vice president, and so that's still, I guess that's still pretty good, or something like that. So you're right. It's been a one-way trajectory, and maybe just not set for, or what I'm looking for was not anticipating losing. Although all the studies, or not studies, the stories that I've seen in the paper are indicating that her internal polling was saying they never were ahead or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a long shot. I mean, for her to replace Biden and to be in a position to be able to run the way she did. I mean, the fact that she got that close with basically a 2.5-month campaign is still pretty remarkable. But I think you're right. I think she and a lot of other people were just, again, it was like 2016 all over again. Like, how could we lose to this oaf? And just not prepared for that. And I think it probably demoralized her.
I know. I understand, and I'm sure it did demoralize her. But if you choose certain arenas, I mean, if you choose that to be an actor, you're going to do a lot of auditions where you don't get the part. It's built into the profession. And if you don't have that kind of resilience, then I think you're in the wrong profession.
Yeah, I was going to say acting, politics, it's probably more rejection than it is acceptance.
Yep. And I will say, back from my days as a journalist, there's a fair amount of rejection there too, David. I don't know. Maybe I should have. Yeah. But I've heard that the halls of academia can be pretty rough as well.
Well, rough, but I still say that nowhere near as rough as whatever the real world is. The real world is probably rougher or something like that.
Well, David, thank you for spending such an amount of time with us today. It is always so much fun, and I'm sure we will be doing it again very soon. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure, and Happy New Year to your audience. Thank you.
Yes. That is going to do it for me today. Of course, Driving It Home with Patty Vasquez is up next. Let's see, she's going to be joined by Chuck Hildebrandt, apparently a self-described library scofflaw. He has a 50-year-old overdue library book, and he's using it for a very special cause. That'll be fun. Be here tomorrow. I will be also having fun. It's going to be Mark Jacob and Jennifer Schulze from 4 to 5. We're going to do another media segment after our media emergency on Monday. Have a great evening, my friends. Stay safe. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.